For peasants of centuries past, nightfall was more than the absence of light. It was a realm of uncertainty and fear. Without electricity, villages sank into near-total darkness once the sun disappeared. Shadows lengthened across fields, forests loomed at the edges of settlements, and the silence of night carried strange creaks and whispers. Every sound, the howl of a wolf, the cry of an owl, the rustle of branches, was charged with meaning. Night was believed to belong to spirits, witches, and restless souls, a time when the boundaries between the living and the unseen world grew dangerously thin. Because of this, peasants avoided venturing outside after dusk unless necessity forced them. Roads were considered unsafe, not only for the risk of bandits or wild animals, but for the fear of encountering wandering spirits. A lone traveler could stumble upon a black dog that vanished in a blink or follow a strange flickering light into the marsh, never to return. Candles and oil lamps provided little comfort, their weak glow only emphasizing the depth of surrounding darkness. To survive the night meant staying close to hearth and family, where warmth and prayer offered protection. In homes, rituals guarded against the unseen dangers of night. Windows might be covered with cloths or marked with a cross to keep evil spirits from peering inside. Families recited prayers before sleep, invoking divine protection against nightmares or nocturnal visitors. Children were warned not to whistle indoors or at night, for it was believed to summon malicious forces. Even mundane acts carried weight. Forgetting to close the door tightly or leaving shoes overturned might be interpreted as an invitation for misfortune. Night was thus both practical danger and spiritual threat. With predators prowling and disease spreading more easily in cold, damp air, peasants lived with constant vulnerability after sunset. Yet the deeper fear lay not in wolves or illness, but in what could not be seen. The spirits thought to roam freely in darkness. For villagers, the night was never truly empty. It was alive, filled with unseen presences that demanded respect, caution, and ritual if one hoped to greet the morning safely. For the peasant, the forest was both a source of life and a place of dread. It provided wood for fires, berries for food, and animals for hunting, yet it also stretched into a vast, mysterious world where human presence seemed fragile. The deeper one went, the darker the shadows became, and with them rose the conviction that the forest belonged to beings beyond human control. Tales spoke of spirits who watched from behind trees, testing or punishing those who entered without respect. The most feared of these figures was the forest guardian, often imagined as tall, hairy, and wild-eyed, the Leshy. He was believed to lead wanderers astray, reshaping paths so that even the most familiar route became unfamiliar. A peasant who failed to show proper reverence, by crossing himself, leaving an offering, or whispering a prayer, risked becoming lost forever. Strange lights flickering among the branches were seen as warnings, while sudden gusts of wind were taken as signs that the Leshy was near. To step into the woods unprepared was to gamble with unseen forces. Superstitions shaped how peasants behaved in these environments. Hunters left small pieces of bread or salt at the base of trees, hoping to appease the spirits. Parents warned children never to call each other's names in the forest, for voices might be mimicked by spirits, luring the unwary deeper. If someone disappeared, villagers often assumed they had angered the forest's guardians rather than simply losing their way. This belief gave the wilderness a moral order. Respect it, and you might survive. Disrespect it, and you would be claimed. Yet fear of the forest was balanced by awe. Many peasants believed that spirits of ancestors or protective beings lived among the trees, guiding those who treated nature with care. The forest was therefore not only a place of danger, but also of connection, a living, breathing realm where human life touched the divine. For the peasant, every path through the woods carried the weight of mystery, reminding them that nature itself was never empty but filled with unseen presences. Water was life for the peasant, yet it was also deeply feared. Rivers provided fish, lakes gave fresh water, and wells sustained entire households, but beneath the calm surface lurked mysteries. Peasants believed that water was inhabited by spirits who could be generous or vengeful depending on how they were treated. Bathing or drawing water after dark was seen as dangerous, for nighttime was when these beings stirred most freely. A splash heard in silence or ripples with no visible cause could make even the bravest villager shudder. The most common figures of fear were water spirits, rusalki in rivers and ponds, and the vodyanoi in deeper waters. Rusalki were imagined as pale maidens, sometimes beautiful, sometimes frightening, who lured the unwary into the depths. They were said to appear on summer nights, brushing their hair at the riverbank, singing songs that drew young men closer until they vanished beneath the surface. The Vodyanoi, by contrast, was often pictured as an old frog-like man, dwelling in rivers and mills. He could drown livestock or drag careless swimmers under if not respected with offerings. Wells, though closer to home, carried their own fears. Peasants whispered that spirits lived at the bottom, ready to punish those who behaved disrespectfully. Throwing trash into a well or drawing water without proper words of thanks might invite illness or misfortune. Parents warned children never to peer too long into the depths, for the water's surface was said to reflect not only one's face but also glimpses of the other world. Dropping a coin or a crust of bread into a well was a common ritual, a gift to the spirit believed to dwell below. These superstitions reflected both dependence and dread. Water was essential, yet it could kill with drowning, disease, or sudden floods. For peasants, attributing such dangers to spirits gave meaning to tragedies they could not control. By treating rivers, lakes, and wells with respect and ritual, they hoped to keep balance with the unseen. Each trip to draw water was not merely a chore, but a quiet negotiation with forces believed to live beneath the rippling surface. If the forest and rivers belonged to wild, unpredictable spirits, then the home itself was thought to shelter a spirit of its own. For peasants, the house was more than wood and stone. It was a living space watched over by an unseen guardian, most often imagined as the domovoi. This household spirit was said to dwell near the stove or in the attic, rarely seen but always felt. Families believed that the domovoi protected the home if treated well, but turned mischievous or even cruel if angered. Respecting him was as much a part of daily life as sweeping the floor or tending the fire. The domovoi's presence was linked to both luck and order. If animals thrived, crops flourished, and bread rose well in the oven, people said the spirit was pleased. But if milk soured, tools broke unexpectedly, or quarrels spread in the household, it was a sign the domovoi had been offended. To keep him content, families left small offerings, bread, porridge, or even a pinch of salt, set aside in a quiet corner at night. During important moments, such as moving into a new house or bringing in a newborn, peasants whispered prayers to invite the spirit's blessing. Superstitions shaped daily behavior within the home. It was considered dangerous to whistle indoors, for the sound might anger the domovoi or invite other spirits. Sweeping dirt out after sunset was forbidden, since it was thought to sweep away fortune. Children were warned to treat animals gently, for cruelty might provoke the household spirit's wrath. Even ordinary noises, creaks in the night or sudden gusts through the chimney, were explained as the domovoi reminding the family of his presence. Though feared, the household spirit was also cherished as part of the family's unseen life. In a world filled with uncertainty, poor harvests, illness, storms, the idea of a guardian within the home brought comfort. He was strict, unpredictable, and demanded respect, but he was also a protector. For the peasant, the hearth was not only warmth and food, but a sacred space shared with a being whose moods could shape the fate of the entire household. Illness was one of the greatest fears for peasants, who lived far from doctors and relied on folk remedies. Without modern medicine, disease seemed mysterious, unpredictable, and deadly. Fevers, coughs, or sudden wasting away were not explained by germs, but by curses, spirits, or the dreaded evil eye. A child who grew weak overnight or an animal that sickened without cause might be said to have been struck by someone's envious glance. The belief that ill health could be caused by invisible forces gave peasants both comfort and terror, for at least misfortune had an explanation. The evil eye was perhaps the most feared. A stranger's look, especially if filled with jealousy, was thought to pierce like a weapon. Blue eyes, in particular, were sometimes blamed for casting this curse, though even neighbors or relatives could be suspected. Mothers guarded their infants carefully, covering their faces in public or pinning protective charms to their clothing. If a child cried excessively, people whispered that someone must have admired them too much. Compliments, rather than welcomed, were often treated with suspicion. A simple phrase like, "Your child looks strong," might trigger alarm instead of pride. To counteract these unseen dangers, peasants turned to ritual and symbol. Spitting over one's shoulder, making the sign of the cross, or muttering a protective prayer were common defenses. Amulets of iron, red thread, or tiny bags of herbs were tied to children's clothes or hung above cradles. If illness struck, healers were called to whisper incantations, sprinkle holy water, or burn herbs to cleanse the curse. These practices, though rooted in superstition, offered families a sense of control in the face of helplessness. Such beliefs reflected both fear and hope. Illness was real and deadly, yet by naming it as the work of spirits or envy, peasants could fight back through ritual. The evil eye was not just superstition, it was a way to explain the unexplainable and to protect loved ones from unseen harm. In a world where life was fragile, the smallest ritual, a charm, a prayer, a whispered spell, was a shield against forces too powerful to ignore. For peasants, life was filled with dangers both visible and invisible. To guard against illness, bad luck, or evil spirits, they relied on amulets and charms, small objects believed to carry powerful protection. These talismans might seem simple to modern eyes, but for villagers, they were shields stronger than any weapon. A scrap of red cloth, a piece of iron, or a small bag of herbs could mean the difference between safety and disaster. No child, animal, or traveler was considered truly safe without some form of charm. Iron was especially revered. A nail driven into the doorway or a horseshoe nailed above it was thought to repel witches and wandering spirits. Mothers sometimes placed an iron key in a baby's cradle to keep away the evil eye. Red thread, tied around a wrist or ankle, was another common defense, symbolizing life and strength. Bread and salt, ordinary food items, became sacred when placed on thresholds or carried in pockets. To a peasant, every material had hidden power if used with the right intention. Charms were not limited to objects. Words themselves were considered protective, and whispered prayers or incantations were repeated in moments of fear. Some women carried crosses sewn secretly into their clothing, while others wore tiny pouches filled with blessed herbs or bits of wax from church candles. Travelers might take sprigs of wormwood or garlic to ward off spirits on the road. These tokens served as constant reminders that the unseen world was near, and only vigilance could keep it at bay. The power of amulets lay as much in belief as in the objects themselves. Carrying a charm gave peasants confidence that they were not defenseless against misfortune. In times when storms ruined crops, wolves attacked flocks, or illness spread suddenly, charms became symbols of hope. Whether or not they truly worked mattered less than the comfort they gave. For peasants, protection was never guaranteed, but with a talisman close at hand, they felt watched over in a dangerous and unpredictable world. Peasants lived close to nature, and every small sign in the world around them carried meaning. A crow cawing on a fence, a dog howling at night, or a sudden crack of thunder could send a shiver through the household. These were not random events, but omens, messages from the unseen. Daily life was watched carefully for such signs, and every unusual occurrence demanded interpretation. To ignore them was to risk angering fate, for peasants believed that destiny often announced itself through animals, weather, and chance encounters. Birds were especially powerful messengers. An owl hooting near the house foretold death, while a rooster crowing at the wrong hour signaled misfortune. If a magpie landed on the roof, gossip or betrayal was expected. Cats, too, carried weight in superstition. A black cat crossing one's path was considered bad luck, though in some places it was thought to protect against evil. Even insects were read for meaning. A swarm of bees near the home was a blessing, but a sudden flight away meant disaster ahead. The farmyard itself became a stage of omens. If cows refused to give milk, it was suspected that a witch had cursed them. A horse refusing to enter a stable might be sensing spirits inside. Broken tools or spoiled food were not just accidents, but signs of displeasure from household or natural forces. Farmers watched the skies with equal caution. Halos around the moon warned of storms, while sudden stillness in the air suggested that danger was near. In every detail, life seemed filled with signals demanding vigilance. These beliefs shaped behavior. A peasant who saw an ill omen might postpone travel, delay planting, or avoid meeting strangers that day. Omens were not taken lightly, for they offered guidance in a world with little certainty. By respecting signs and adjusting their actions, peasants felt they could maintain balance with fate. Every crow, every howl, every shadow in the field became part of a dialogue between human life and the hidden powers believed to govern it. For peasants, death was never distant. Illness, hunger, and accidents claimed lives often, and every passing carried with it layers of ritual and fear. To bury someone improperly was to risk disturbing not only the soul of the deceased, but also the safety of the living. Death was seen as a threshold, and the spirits of the departed lingered near, watching the family and waiting for the right ceremonies to be performed. Without care, the dead could become restless, bringing misfortune to those left behind. Funeral customs were filled with protective acts. Mirrors were covered so that the soul would not become trapped inside. Water basins were overturned, and windows were opened to give the spirit a clear path to depart. Coins were placed on the eyes of the dead to help them see the way, while candles burned beside the body to ward off darkness. Neighbors gathered not only to grieve but also to ensure that the rituals were done correctly, for mistakes could invite haunting or ill luck upon the whole village. Superstitions governed even the smallest details. The deceased's possessions had to be handled carefully. Some were buried with them, while others were destroyed so their spirit would not return to claim them. It was forbidden to sweep the floor until after the funeral, lest the soul be swept away too soon. When the coffin was carried out, it was never through the main door but a side path, ensuring the spirit could not easily return. Such practices reflected the fear that death was not final unless boundaries between the living and the dead were carefully maintained. Despite the fear, peasants also saw death as sacred. Prayers, songs, and offerings connected the departed to ancestors, weaving the dead into the ongoing life of the family. Though spirits could be dangerous, they could also protect if honored. Death was both an end and a transformation, and peasants lived with the knowledge that their daily actions, rituals, respect, and remembrance kept the balance. For them, the graveyard was not only a place of sorrow, but also a reminder that life and death were inseparable, bound together in mystery and fear. For peasants whose survival depended on harvests, the sky was a vast book of signs waiting to be read. Clouds, stars, and winds were not random, but messages about what was to come. Without scientific forecasting, villagers relied on tradition and observation passed down through generations. A red dawn might mean rain, a halo around the moon a warning of storms. Every shift in the heavens was studied with care, for the success of crops, and therefore the survival of families, seemed written above them. Weather omens shaped daily decisions. If birds flew low to the ground, rain was expected, and peasants rushed to bring hay under shelter. A sudden warm wind in winter was taken as a bad omen, foretelling illness or famine. Thunder heard in early spring was considered a blessing, awakening the fields for sowing, while thunder too late in the season suggested poor yields. Even the behavior of livestock was read as part of the sky's language. If cows lay down or horses snorted restlessly, bad weather was said to be near. The stars and moon carried equal weight. A bright full moon was a sign of plentiful harvests, but also a time when spirits roamed more freely. Shooting stars could mean a soul had departed, while constellations were used to predict both weather and fate. Some peasants believed that to point at the stars invited misfortune, for it was a sign of disrespect toward the heavens. Night skies were therefore both beautiful and ominous, filled with wonder but never without hidden meaning. These beliefs gave peasants a sense of connection with the universe. By reading the sky, they felt less powerless against the unpredictable cycles of nature. Omens, whether true or not, offered guidance in uncertain times. To them, the heavens were not distant or empty. They were alive, filled with signs that spoke directly to human life. In every cloud and star, peasants sought assurance that tomorrow would bring enough rain, sun, or warmth to keep their families alive. The peasant year was not only marked by work in the fields, but also by sacred and dangerous days scattered across the calendar. Certain times were believed to open the boundary between the human world and the unseen. Nights such as Midsummer's Eve, Christmas, or the winter solstice carried a special weight. These were moments when spirits walked more freely, when magic was strongest, and when both blessings and curses might fall upon households. To ignore these days, or to break their rules, was thought to invite disaster. On Midsummer Night, peasants told of rusalki dancing in meadows and witches gathering herbs under the moon. Fires were lit to ward off evil, and young people leapt over them to gain protection and fertility. At Christmas, or during the long winter nights, the dead were believed to draw near, and families left offerings of food on windowsills to appease wandering souls. During these times, fortune-telling was common. Girls peered into mirrors or listened for omens in the night, hoping to glimpse the faces of future husbands. But these rituals carried danger. Looking too closely into the unknown risked attracting malevolent forces. Spells cast on certain nights could rebound, and spirits might punish those who sought forbidden knowledge. Children were warned never to wander on such evenings, for the forest and crossroads were said to be full of witches, demons, and restless dead. The atmosphere was one of awe and dread, a mixture of celebration and caution that reminded everyone of the fragile line between safety and peril. For peasants, these calendar days gave rhythm to the year beyond farming cycles. They were reminders that time itself carried hidden powers, and that each season had moments when the ordinary world gave way to mystery. By observing rituals, offering prayers, and respecting prohibitions, villagers hoped to survive these dangerous thresholds. The turning of the year was not just about seasons. It was about guarding the community from forces that lingered, waiting for the right moment to cross into human life. For peasants, dreams were never dismissed as simple illusions of sleep. They were regarded as messages from the other world, warnings or promises that could shape decisions in daily life. A dream of clear water foretold good fortune, while muddy or dark water meant sickness. To dream of fire could signal both blessing and danger, depending on whether the flames were bright or choking with smoke. Every vision carried weight, and upon waking, peasants often shared their dreams with family, who helped interpret their meaning. Certain dreams were feared above all. To see a coffin or a deceased relative was taken as a sign that death was near. Losing teeth in a dream meant the loss of a loved one, while falling from a height foretold disaster. Animals that appeared in dreams, snakes, black dogs, crows, were linked with evil spirits. Even a dream of laughter could be ominous, interpreted as spirits mocking the dreamer. Such images were not brushed aside. They were warnings to prepare for misfortune or to seek protection through prayer and ritual. Dreams were also tools for prediction. During special nights of the year, such as Christmas or midsummer, young people performed rituals before sleep to summon dreams of the future. A girl might place a mirror under her pillow to glimpse her future husband, or eat salted bread before bed to dream of the one who would bring her water. Though playful on the surface, these practices reflected a deep belief that dreams revealed truths hidden from waking life. Forebodings extended beyond sleep into waking intuition. A sudden chill, a shadow across the path, or a strange silence in the fields might all be read as omens. Peasants believed the body itself could sense danger, and ignoring such feelings was unwise. Dreams and forebodings together formed a language of signs, guiding people in a world full of uncertainty. For villagers, the boundary between the seen and unseen was never closed. Even sleep could not shield them from the whispers of fate. Looking back on the world of peasants, it becomes clear that superstition was not simply ignorance, but survival. With little access to science, medicine, or reliable protection from natural disasters, people turned to rituals, charms, and stories to make sense of the unknown. Fear of forests, rivers, dreams, or omens gave shape to dangers they could not control. By giving names to spirits and rules to follow, peasants created an order in a life otherwise filled with uncertainty. Superstition, in this sense, was both shield and compass. These beliefs also bound communities together. A ritual at a funeral, a charm on a cradle, or a fire lit on Midsummer's Eve were not just personal acts, but collective ones, shared across generations. They reminded peasants that they were not alone in facing the vastness of nature and fate. To laugh at omens or ignore rituals was to break from the community, to endanger not only oneself but also neighbors and kin. Fear became a force of cohesion, uniting villages through common traditions. Superstitions endured because they addressed emotional needs as much as physical ones. The thought that illness came from an evil eye, or that a spirit watched over the hearth, gave comfort in times of suffering. Even if rituals failed, they offered hope, and hope was as essential as bread. Stories of spirits and signs gave meaning to random misfortune, transforming chaos into a pattern that could be respected and perhaps influenced. In this way, fear was softened by faith in ritual. Though modern life has replaced many of these beliefs with science and reason, echoes remain. We still knock on wood, avoid walking under ladders, or feel uneasy when a black cat crosses our path. These habits remind us that superstition is deeply human, born from the same need for protection and certainty that shaped peasant life. The peasants' fears may seem distant now, but they tell us a timeless truth. In the face of the unknown, people will always seek signs, stories, and rituals to carry them through.